As 𝐿𝐬 wakes up in the hospital bed, she has to deal with not only the physical injuries but also 𝐲𝐬𝐬's mysterious disappearance and her inner fears. How will she uncover the truth behind it all? 51. My mind woke before my body, my limbs still heavy from sleep. A dull ache from the base of my spine, working its way up to my head where it settled. I knew I was on a bed firm yet soft mattress was ingrained into my memory by now, but the smell of blood was new. Why did this happen to me? Why did this always happen to me? Slowly but surely, the feeling came back in my limbs. I winced, my hands raising to rub at my eyes to try and clear some of the fog. A voice startled me, causing my heart to jump-start. You are awake. My eyes flew open, locking directly onto target. I tried to pull myself up, but my arms felt weak, and it failed. Blake snickered, crossing his arms as he stood in the doorway and watched me struggle. Exhausted, I felt my stomach churn with nausea. The desperate need to rid my life of his very being overwhelmed me. It wasn't new to me. Being weaker was rather familiar. I was used to it, able to succumb to my own numbness whenever something happened. It was the after-pain that always got me. The feeling of disgust and exhaustion always haunted me. The ghostly touches, the bruises and aches in every limb and organ from the pain, the dull thumping of my heart as it tried to heal itself. My consciousness may be able to hide, but my compassion, my happiness, my love for life was always destroyed. I was used to abuse from Darius. The only curveball he had given me was Ash. But Blake, that threw me. I was supposed to be safe in 𝐲𝐬𝐬's land, so why I had been taken. I knew he had guards on me. So how did Blake get to me? Why didn't 𝐲𝐬𝐬 come running to my rescue like he did when Blake last took me by surprise? He claimed he could feel me through our bond, and I thought I had shut him out. So maybe I truly did. Did I block him so bad that he didn't care? Did my not-so-secret guards get hurt? Did they know I was missing? How long had I been missing? Questions. Plenty of time for that. But first it has been requested for me to look after you. He mimicked quotation marks, a grimace on his face. So, I need to bathe you. I swallowed past the dryness in my throat, my stubbornness taking the lead. There was no way in hell he was going to touch me. Not so intimately. No, I growled. I can bathe myself. He tugged me. Always so stubborn. I glared daggers at him, but he just smirked, shrugging. Fine. Whatever. He snickered. I can't deal with your childishness. I made a deal anyway. I'm not supposed to hurt you. And yesterday was not that, right? I quipped. He narrowed his eyes. You do realize that in my pack, if we come across a rogue human, or one such as you, we kill them? I slammed my lips together, glaring at him silently. Look, it is either me, though one who cannot hurt you any further, or one of my men. He grinned, stepping towards me, grimacing. I weighed out my options. Neither were good. The fact he would either be bathing me or watching me, or one of his swine, ass-grabbing men would do it instead. At least with Blake I knew he couldn't hurt me anymore. I mean, I could do neither and wallow in my own dirt and pity. I had plans. I needed to see where I was, scope out the place, and see who the fuck wants me here and why. Sighing heavily through my nose, I dragged myself into a sitting position. Fine. I see you have made your decision. He clicked his tongue, wrapping his arm under my bicep. I was naked. The blanket falling from my chest revealed the bruises his hands had left on my body. With wobbly, tired legs, he led me to a door on the opposing wall. Inside was a simple end suite, one I was not expecting from a slight cabin. He set me down on the toilet, standing back to wait. "You're going to watch me piss too." I snarked. He growled, the sound rumbling the plastic seat. "Do I need to remind you who you are talking to? Human." I dropped my gaze from his, feeling beaten at his unspoken threats. I needed to work out how far I could push his buttons. But damn, I really had to piss. Pulling some toilet paper from the dispenser, I tried to use it as a muffler as I found my relief. The moment I was finished, he was back beside me, pushing me into a shower. "You can wash yourself, but I am not leaving," he snapped. I nodded, eagerly turning the warm water on and shoving myself into it. Is this what people in prison felt like? They were rare these days. Mostly our punishment was down to the wolves, and they used our old jail cells for their own demons. But there were few prisons left, and they were heavily guarded. Grabbing some soap, I lathered myself in it, not opposing to the masculine scent. I scrubbed my body raw, feeling tears pool in my eyes. I could still feel the dirt, feel the fingerprints engraved in my skin like every time. I could have stayed in there for hours, trying to burn the skin cells from my body. But Blake had stopped me, complaining I was using all the hot water. The room had fogged up, and he was grimacing as he watched me make my thighs bleed. I had torn a few cuts open, no doubt left behind from his knife. I wondered if I was the first person here. I mean, it wasn't my first time in the bull's ring. I knew my beginning, and what to do in the middle to get there. I wondered if anybody else had been in my shoes. Blake oversaw everything, from getting dried to getting clothed in a random dress. It was skin tight, cutting into my waist and chest, my breasts almost pooling out of the top. I wasn't even a big-chested girl. That's how tight it was. He had to tie it in the back, saying it was a corset and that was how it was done. The skirt was short too, barely gracing the lower part of my ass. He forced me into an uncomfortable pair of 4-inch heels too. I hated high heels with a passion. I could walk in them fine, I just hated the fuckers. He took me by the elbow, leading me down some hallways. I ignored his grip, keeping my head high until we arrived at a dining room. The two men in there were equally as large. One I recognized as one of Blake's henchmen yesterday. "Take a seat. Breakfast is already made," Blake muttered, pushing me into a chair. I grunted as I sat, feeling my ass cheeks hit the wood. The skirt of this dress definitely did not cover enough, and I had no choice but to deal with the cool wood on my barely clad skin. He had only given me a phone too, doing so with a devilish smirk on his face. I felt my heart constrict as a bowl of porridge was set before me. Banana slices placed in a circle in the center with a drizzle of syrup all around it. Now, you may think it's a weird thing to get all worked up about, but it was eerily close to what I used to eat in Evermore. Darius could not cook, and his specialty was anything instant or toasted. Days where he would try to treat me, he would make porridge drizzled with golden syrup in a love heart shape. There would also be strawberries, cut into thin slices that made up a small heart of their own in the middle. It was such a weird coincidence that I couldn't help snort at the very idea of the two being related. Sinking my spoon into my porridge, it tasted fine. It didn't occur to me until I was nearly finished that I probably should have questioned its ingredients. Slowly putting down the spoon, I swallowed down the nerves. Isn't kidnapping supposed to be traumatizing, and yet you are feeding and bathing me? The henchman snorted, Blake shooting him a strange look. Well, when there is a pretty price on your head, I find it my mission to look after my sales, Blake stated, placing his coffee mug down. Price? I wondered. Yes, You seem to be a popular human. My eyes furrowed, wondering what the hell he was talking about. I had no relations and things like this. Selling people. Absolutely absurd so. The abuse. That was just seasoning. I snorted. He cocked his head, not finding me amusing. You seem to be taking it well. What? The other girls not last this long. I wondered, egging him on. I needed to see how far I could push him. His eyes flashed to their darker shade, a growl tearing out his lips. No, they didn't. Wincing, I dropped my gaze. So I wasn't the first. How disgusting of a man he was. Tell me, 𝐿𝐬, why is it you are so calm about all of this? Did you enjoy it? Is that what it was? He smirked heavily. Are you masochistic? I clicked my tongue. Oh yes. Because being abused and falling unconscious is my favorite pastime. So, it isn't your first time. How right I was. I narrowed my eyes as he nudged his friend and they chucked, changing the subject. I slowly finished my porridge. How long have I been here? Only a few hours. Blake stated, setting his mug in the sink. Just the night. Where am I? That ruins all the fun now, doesn't it? He taunted. You are in my cabin. You and Alpha live in a cabin. I snorted. His eyes narrowed. His ego no doubt sore. This is my temporary home. Interesting. Why would he need a temporary home? Going by his rising agitation and lack of patience, I needed to change my interrogation tactics so. You have to homes in your territory. Sounds like you got a lot of money. I smiled, batting my eyelashes. A lot of power. A lot of strength. He shifted, watching me curiously through dark eyes. I am powerful and strong. Yes, I can tell. I grinned, flashing my eyes down his body as I leaned forward. It seemed to have worked. His hands flexing at his sides as he licked his lips. Eyes falling to my breast. You should see my home back in Packland. 10 bedrooms, 3 stories, even a red room. He smirked, stepping closer to me. Extensive gardens and cars. Nothing like the land around here. I smiled up at him, a triumphant gleam in my eye as I got the information I wanted. A temporary home? In a place that was not his land. Was this the no man's land 𝐻𝐸 spoke so grimly of? No power, no authority over territory. Every person for themselves. Sounds wonderful. I hummed, placing my cheek on my palm. Does it snow there? I love the snow. Why, I mused. I hated snow. He shrugged, leaning a hand on the table. It's more Midland. Not a lot of snow. Only when it's cold. I pouted, letting a small sorrowful O leave my lips. He was quick to recover. But in the summer, it's beautiful. Not hot either. I would love to go. I grinned. Maybe one day. He ran his fingers down my face. But someone is paying a pretty price for you back in one piece today. It would be a shame to lose such value. I pouted, shrugging. Maybe. His eyes fogged over suddenly, his body going tense before his head darted to the door. A snarl ripped out of his throat and I was forcibly pulled into his chest. There was shouting and growling sounding from outside, loud clattering and shooting of guns. I gasped, stumbling into Blake's chest. Let's go, shut up. Slut. He snapped before spinning to his henchman. Clear the way. I need to get her out of here. The henchman nodded, eyes stern as he ran out of the room. I heard the front door burst open, a loud shout of terror filling the small cabin. I tensed, fear lacing my very soul. Was someone here to kill us? Was I about to die? Alpha. The henchman screamed before his voice ended into a garbled mess. Blake growled, hastily pulling me into him. How did he find us? I wanted to ask who. Who found us? What found us? But I couldn't even breath. His left arm was wrapped around my middle, his right around my neck. I was hardly breathing. His grip had tightened, suffocating to allow me to. A low growl sounded, vibrating the walls themselves. Blake's breathing quickened as he silently cursed, dragging us to a door. It creaked slightly as it opened, causing me to squeal with fear of being caught. Looking around, we were trapped. We had ended up in the kitchen. The cupboards a glaring white and the room small and quaint. They would soon be splattered with my blood. No doubt Blake would leave me to get killed and run for himself. Footsteps echoed through the house, the rumbling consistent with that of a thunderstorm. Deep vibrations that caused my heart to stammer. The urge to vomit returning to me once more. The door in the dining room smacked open and Blake shifted his arm, allowing me to breathe. I took an alarming mouthful of air, feeling the burn of it in my lungs. He seemed to have realized his hold on me, slackening slightly to drag me another step backwards. Through the sound of my heavy breathing and pulsating heart, the footsteps grew closer and closer. A floorboard creaked, fingers pressing into the wood of the door as it ever so slowly opened. My breath hitched as the wood groaned and cracked, millimeters turning into inches. Whoever it was taunting us, the sound of them inhaling deeply before another growl sounded. My ears throbbed, my stomach burning. If I didn't pass out, I was going to vomit all over Blake again. The door opened. Burning night skies peered at me through the door, a cry of relief escaping my lips at the sight. Ezra, 50 to TW fight blood. As the cry of my soulmate's name left my lips, the arm around my waist tightened. A hand snaked up my middle, fingers securing themselves around the middle of my throat. I startled a gasp, hands rising to pry the fingers from my windpipe. Ezra stood in the doorway, his shoulders broad and chest heaving with every breath. He was nude too, his skin covered in various splashes of blood, claws extended, canines flashing as he snarled at the male holding me. Blake was stiff, but tried to play off his nerves by laughing cautiously. Alpha, what a pleasant surprise, Blake chirped, causing 𝐲𝐿 to snap his teeth. Pray tell why you felt the need to slaughter my entire force. Ezra didn't care for his teasing, his black eyes fixed on the hand around my throat. Release her. I shuddered as the deep vibrations of his beast struck my nerves. Blake had the audacity to laugh, the loud bellows vibrating my back. The human. No, the alien serpent behind you. You had no right to take her. 𝐲𝐿 snapped. How could I resist? A tempting human, a creature so easily manipulated and controlled. Blake hummed. She was just teasing me, in her little bikini, all soaking wet. A simple drug was all I needed to grab her from your land. He squeezed my throat, causing me to gasp in alarm when his claws punctured the skin. I could feel them sink into my flesh, the warmth of my blood dripping and pooling in my collarbone. 𝐲𝐿's nose twitched, inhaling my scent, before he seemed to freeze. A slow blink, his eyes traveling the length of my body before his head titled. I watched with struggling breath as his tongue darted to wet his lips before a frown curled them to taste fully. It reminded me oddly of a reptile, but it only made Blake laugh. 𝐲𝐿's teeth clashed, anger coating his expression. You hurt her? You touched what is not yours. Blake smirked. Come on, Alpha. She's just a human. What else is she good for? The next few seconds were a blur. One moment, I was losing precious oxygen as Blake's claws sank into my throat. And the next, I was flying. My head smacked into a nearby cupboard. Disseration at me. It was nowhere near as bad as the pulsing in my neck. Though, my hand started up in alarm. The deep wounds from Blake's claws had torn the skin along my neck. Blood coated my palms and my stomach churned with nausea. I was going to pass out again. Through bleary, tear-filled eyes, I looked up to find out what had happened. 𝐿𝐴zra and Blake were scuffling. A mass of muscled limbs and blood blurred together along with the sounds of teeth snapping together. It wasn't long before one was prevalent, and I scurried back when 𝐴zra forced the taller male to the ground. 𝐿𝐴zra was livid, his entire body shaking with adrenaline. The need to hurt the enemy ingrained deep in his soul. He was 𝐾𝐤 right now, first sprouting on his arms as he pinned Blake to the floor. Blake was gasping for air whilst the blood from my neck continued to pour. I coughed, my chest rattling as I hacked up phlegm, spitting onto the floor. Blood splattered instead of the usual. 𝐴zra. I must have not been loud enough because he was still fighting to pin the other alpha down. I whimpered, wheezing for breath as I looked for something to relieve the bleeding. A couple of cupboards down was a tea towel hanging from the handle, and I dragged my weak body to pull it from the door. It went with a clatter, just as 𝐴zra growled, placing the towel around my throat. I glanced up at the fight. Submit to me, 𝐴zra snarled. Blake growled, arms and legs pinned beneath 𝐴zra. Get off me. You have no claim on her. Oh God. Not the thing to say. She is mine. 𝐿𝐴zra roared, pushing all of his weight on the Blake's neck. Blake's eyes widened as he spluttered to speak. You took what was mine. You hurt what was mine. 𝐴zra growled. Now you will feel what it is like to have your life choices ripped away from you. Please. Blake spluttered. He was going to kill him. Despite everything Blake had done, he didn't deserve to die. Much like Darius, he didn't deserve death. He was a man of cruelty, a man of selfishness. He deserved to suffer. 𝐿𝐴zra? I called weakly. Using my voice caused me to choke again, my chest heaving as I coughed up more blood. 𝐴zra, I tried to shout. Luck must be in my favor because his head snapped up to me. My hand clutched the bloodied towel, the other gripping onto a nearby handle for dear life. You can't kill him, I weakly rasped. He hurt you. 𝐴zra's dark eyes bore into mine. I winced at the amount of blood on him and the rage in his eyes. I could hear the pain in his voice, the anger he felt from finding out this way. It's not the first time in my life. I sighed. He doesn't deserve to just die. He growled. Yes, he does. He doesn't. I winced, my head pounding with pain. Someone like him does not deserve a quick death. My head was swimming, my arm falling from the cupboard as my body grew weak. I groaned as I slumped to the floor, blinking past the days before me. This wasn't my first time passing out after the trauma. My body and mind rather liked to do that to me. It was frustrating, but I knew I was safe now, because despite everything, I knew 𝐴zra would be on the other side. Please, I whispered before I succumbed to the pain. The same dull beeping of a machine met my senses, a wicked sense of déjà vu causing my mind to spiral. My eyes peeled open, eager to find out where I was and what happened. At least I was alive. I'm used. The room was dull, the curtains drawn and casting shadows over my bed. I took in the sight of drips in my arms and white sheets around my legs. A painful sigh of realization that I was once again in the hospital. My body was numb, my mind calm despite the raging seas from only hours before. Or was it days? It was hard to say. A movement came from my right and with dull fascination. My eyes lastly moved to my left, only for my breath to hitch and the heart monitor to pick up pace. 𝐶𝐬 was studying me, leaned forward eagerly in an armchair. His hair was disheveled, his body still covered in blood. It was dried and crusted, telling me he hadn't bathed since the fight. 𝐶𝐬, I breathed, my throat sore. His blue eyes flickered with emotion, lips pulled down into a grimace. Thirsty. My jaw clenched as I remembered the last time they offered me a drink in the hospital, lacing it with a sleeping drug. Thanks to the doctor. I shakily nodded my head. Though, forcing myself to trust 𝐶𝐬 after everything he had done for me. He had given me a home without fear and rescued me from someone trying to sell me. I had to give him a small step of faith. 𝐶𝐬 stood, moving to pour me a cup of water from a nearby pitcher. The ice clinked as he lifted it, the water sloshing as he inserted a straw for me to drink from. He moved it to my lips, his 2 forefingers securing the straw for me to grasp between my lips. They pressed against my mouth as I drank, causing a strange look to pass over his face. When I pulled away, I thanked him softly. What happened? His jaw clenched as he placed the cup back down. I didn't kill him. I nodded, chewing on the inside of my lip. Okay. Silence enveloped us, and he shifted in his seat. I watched him curiously. The tension in the air was unmistakable as his hand inched to enclose mine. I took it softly, his large palm covering the entire back of mine. How did you find me? I wondered. I tracked Blake's trail. He had your scents. But I could find him. I knew he took you the moment I felt your alarm through the bond. He explained, staring at our entwined hands. Then he disappeared. It was all so sudden, I thought that. I nodded, swallowing down the lump in my throat. He thought Blake killed me. He drugged me. I murmured. He turned my body into a sack of potatoes, and I lost track of time. Next thing I know, I'm being injected again and can barely move and I couldn't do anything. I felt tears burn in my eyes. The outward confession of my demise caused strange emotions to rise in me. 𝐶𝐬's hand burned my skin. The heat of his body was intense compared to the coolness of my own. Did he touch you? I swallowed nervously, shaking my head. I don't know. I was unconscious. It only made his anger worse. He dropped my hand like I had scolded him and jumped from his seat. I flinched as he tore the sheets from my legs, revealing a terrible hospital gown beneath. What are you? His hands pried my thighs apart and my heart raced as fear entrapped my throat. He paused, his head darting up to find my wide, panicked eyes. His arms and face relaxed, releasing some of the tension from his arms. I'm sorry if I startled you. He apologized. I gulped, sniffing away the burning tears. What are you doing? I just wish to smell you. Smell me. I gulped. I want to know what he did so I can castrate him. Despite the terrible nerves. I nodded. It was embarrassing, but I knew it would sate his beast for now. His face inched closer, a deep rumble as he inhaled. I flushed with embarrassment as he hovered there a moment longer, my very soul feeling like it was being ripped from my body. When he moved away, a deep rumble vibrated the bed. I remained still, and his face etched with concern as he gently wrapped me back up in the blankets. Moving to stand by my head, he was tense, distracting himself. He checked the monitors above me. Does it hurt? I shook my head. Nothing does. Good. It shouldn't. He nodded, crossing his arms. I gave you my blood as soon as Blake was taken care of. How did you? His blue eyes flashed down to me, causing me to swallow at the smolder hidden beneath them. He had a medical wing in his little rogue camp. My blood can heal you through a vein for now. When we mate, you can drink it. I swallowed, nodding once. I see. And Blake. Is he? He's alive. He grimaced. Unfortunately. Maybe not for long after. Sighing. I muttered a good. Men like him don't deserve quick deaths. He cocked his head, sitting back down beside me and taking my hand again. You said something before he'd passed out. Oh, I wondered. His eyes blazed, and I inhaled sharply when his gaze dropped to my throat. You said it wasn't the first time someone had hurt you. What did you mean? Oh shit. Walked myself into that one. Didn't I? How was I meant to get out of this? Play dead? No. Pass out. That could work? Or just get up and run away and hope that I don't collapse to the ground, like a deer caught in headlights. I stared up at my savior. Stories and words were on the verge of spilling free but held back by the repercussions of my past trauma. 53. My mouth opens and closes like a fish, unable to figure out what my brain is trying to tell it. Oscar's eyes watched my face with curiosity, trying his hardest to remain calm. I knew he could hear the racing of my heart in my chest, and no doubt the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Fight or flight. I wanted to fight. I wanted to get away from the conversation so badly. But I couldn't. Ezra had proven himself. The weird beast of a man, Wolf had given me more than anyone in my entire life. Time. Patience. When I needed him, he came to save me. He noticed my trauma and realized I have a hard past. And he wasn't up in arms about getting answers. He's supposed to be my soulmate. For crying out loud. So why is it so hard to trust him? I had to pull up my big girl pants and face him head on. Despite the wedgie it may give me, they sent this man to me from heaven, or whatever it was. Within as little as 12 hours, he had tracked me down despite the use of scent blockers, and tore me away from the man who threatened to sell me or even kill me. However, now I am worried about my future. What if the mysterious fire found me again? It sent a shiver down my spine, and I clutched onto Osra's hand as the thought crossed my mind. Ezra wasn't Darius. I could see it now. He was mature, smart, quick-witted, handsome, sexy. Yet he was mysterious and quiet. He had secrets in those oceans of eyes, deep thoughts that went beyond his beast side. He had feelings that wanted to break free. Words that he wanted to say, but he never allowed himself. We are all built around our own trauma, our walls closing it in. It was just up to us as individuals to see past that. 𝐿𝐬, he wondered, squeezing my hand. I blinked out of the daze, giving him a hesitant smile. Apologies. I was thinking rather hard about something. He quirked an eyebrow. Was it something I said? You don't have to answer if you don't want to. God damn it. This man was going to be the end of everything. Wasn't he? He didn't even care that I daydreamed. No, I swallowed nervously, about to put part of my life in this man's hands. I want to tell you. A small crack of the weight on my shoulders crumbled, brushing past my elbows as it hit the floor of the room. Ezra noticed the change that happened, sitting up slightly straighter as he observed me. Okay? He hesitantly smiled. I never thought I would find a beast so attractive. Even his smile. 𝐿𝐬? Serious time. Wedgie approaching. As you know, I had a feeling. I began watching as his body stiffened. He was called Darius. His parents were the leaders of the town, the wealthiest of us all. They ran pretty much everything. I roped my thumb along the back of his hand, dropping my eyes to follow the pattern so I didn't have to see the disappointment on his face. He had the smallest white scars around his knuckles that I smoothed my thumb over. My mother. After losing my father, she groomed me until the age of 12, where she then retreated into her dark cesspit of a home and never came out. I had to work to stay alive, barely scraping by and often skipping meals to keep her and my sister fed. I trained myself to become a chef, tried so hard to get that income. Then one day, just before I turned 16, she perked up as though nothing had happened. 𝐿𝐲 was silent, watching me intently. She was acting like someone else, making friends with the higher-ups. People took sympathy on her, but she was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Pardon my pun. I snorted sarcastically. The next thing I know, she's planned a wedding behind my back and there is nothing I could do about it. I was to stop working as a chef and be engaged to this man I never knew, and she would get a pretty sum of money and hefty status with it. So, she sold you. I winced at the words as they harshly left his lips, still staring at our joined hands. I marveled at the slight freckle on the back of his thumb, clearing my throat. I nodded. Yes, and then what? It was good. For a few months. We courted until I dared to glance up at him through my lashes, finding him intensely staring at my face. His jaw was clenched already, and I knew he would blow up if he found about the slightest misplaced word in my story. It made me even more nervous to continue. He touched me and I didn't want him to. I nibbled my lower lip. Then he made me touch him. He was 2 years older than me, and I didn't want to do it. He manipulated me to thinking it was normal, and over the months I believed him. After 6 months of courting was when he forced himself on me for the first time. Another chip of the boulder fell, crumbling loudly in the silent and tense room. I let out a shriek of surprise when 𝐿𝐲𝐻's claws extended, one of them catching the back of my hand. My head flew up in surprise to find dark eyes locked onto my jaw. I swallowed nervously, feeling sweat build up on my palm as the intensity of his beast sigh forced its way through. You say? The first time as though. He growled through gritted teeth. Most of our relationship was not entirely consensual. I mumbled. So he raped you? He spat, causing me to flinch. He took your innocent child body and used you for his own gain. And you were meant to make that man. For life. You should have run. Should have told someone and fled. My lower lip shook, my cheeks aching as I fought back the tears that wanted to fall so desperately. He had done nothing but state the truth, and yet the gravity of the situation shook me to my very core. I hardly cried, and I knew, if I did, I would not see the end of the tears for a long time. He played games with my head. I tried to tell someone about it all. I told my mother, but she didn't care. She took all the money I saved for her own greedy hands. I whimpered. She told me to just cover the bruises up and I broke off, my voice shaking too much to continue. I felt the tears burn and drip onto our joined palms. It seemed to make him freeze, the incessant shaking of his body halting. I couldn't bear to look at his face. The sympathetic or angry scowl I would find would shatter me. I was worthless. Darius was right. No one would want someone like this. It was too much of a burden. My past was too heavy. 𝐿𝐲𝐬, what else did he do to you? There is something you are not telling me. I choked back a sob when his hand cupped my cheek, tilting my head so I had no choice but to raise my gaze. I avoided looking at him, choosing to stare at the growing fur along his arms instead. He was angry. I barely remember his wolf, not being a fan of the whole teeth and claws thing. Tulip, please, he begged. You are doing so well for telling me this. I found my shoulder relaxing at the pet name, finding soft comfort in the way he spoke to me. The first year was a learning curve. I continued, sniffing back the tears. I had to learn to be someone I wasn't for public image. They paraded me around town as someone's wife. I was supposed to help him lead that awful village. When I didn't comply with anything, it turned to violence. The hairs rose on his arms again, and I dropped my other hand to wrap over the top of the one I held. He radiated from him, heating my body as that strange buzzing flooded my veins. He would use his fists, his words, or force. I whispered. Usually it was fists, but he was a master of wordplay. He could get into my head so easily, and I just let him. I let him do what he wanted with me. It was safer that way. And in my head, consensual why. Why did you not stand up for yourself? Tulip, he demanded. Anger rose in my veins, the buzzing mate bond dying off as it consumed me. He spoke as though I had control of the situation, that I was this strong, independent thinker. I wasn't. My attitude was a show, because I had to be docile around Arias. I built a wall around my heart so no one else could penetrate it. Because I never won. I cried, snapping my head up to meet him. He actually flinched, the snarl on his lips disappearing within a millisecond. I know. Don't. I snapped. Darius would beat me if I said no. Force his cock into me whenever he pleased. He would knock me unconscious and use me. Stab me with knives. Carve things into my skin. He would whip me with his belt until I bled on the kitchen floor. Smash glass into my head. He would do whatever he wanted to, because he was stronger. When fear consumes you, you either choose fight or flight. Right? But me, I always had to choose to succumb. I had to let it happen, allow him to hurt me once, or I would be bedridden for weeks. I laughed darkly, glaring up at the ceiling. Just before the hunt, he shared me with his body. They both used me for their own pleasure until one knocked me unconscious. Darius loved my fear, played it into his favor, manipulated my mind to think it was good. I was just his good girl whenever he wanted something. Nothing good ever came out of it. I believed him for so long. I was at war with myself. So I learned to build walls, to not show emotions. He hated if I daydreamed, hated if I sang. Condor had anything happy in my life. I was a house, wife meant to please him and cook him delicious food. He controlled what I ate, what I wore, where and when I slept, and even who I spoke to. I waved my hands angrily, 𝐿𝐴𝐸's heavy one thumping onto the bed. For 2 fucking years I ignored that man, that devil, and nobody could do anything about it. Even my own mother smacked me whenever she wasn't insulting me to my face. I tried, and nobody cared. My chest was heaving, blurry spots wanting to take over my vision as I fought for breath. I had said too much. Oh God, I had said so much. My anger always got the best of me. I fell backward, burying my face in the pillows. My eyes darted to 𝐿𝐴𝐸 when he snarled so ferociously that I pressed further into the bed. The adrenaline from my outburst died on my tongue at his newfound anger. My throat ran dry as his body pulsate deep, first sprouting, limbs shaking and attempting to form new angles. He bared his teeth, snapping them so loudly that I feared he would turn into a beast right now and eat me. Swallowing heavily, I sobered up my anger. 𝐿𝐴𝐸. His head swung towards me, causing me to flinch into the sheets and curl my head into the pillow at the sight of his half-shifted form. It was silent. His snarling had cut off so abruptly, but I dared not to look up to see the face of his beast again. No one spoke. The only sound was the racing of the heart monitor behind me and my rapid breath. Curse you. Hospital equipment. Seconds turned into minutes, and when I still didn't hear a thing, I hesitantly peeked one eye open. I couldn't see him. Raising my head slightly, I swallowed nervously as I took in the entire room. He wasn't here. He had gone. He left me. I poured my heart out, my anger, my past, my frustrations, and he was gone. Alone. I was alone again. Alone with my thoughts. Thoughts were full of my anger. Anger contrasted my sadness. Sadness enveloped my heart. My heart, unable to cope, thudded softly. I rested my head back into my pillow, allowing the fresh airs to flood my cheeks as I quietly cried. Alone. I hated crying. It was a weakness. I should have known not to trust 𝐲�R'𝐬 with that information. He couldn't even stomach to be around me. Couldn't answer me. Couldn't bear to see my face as I cried. Darius was right. I was worthless. 54. I lay for hours in my own pity, wondering what I had done wrong. Ezra asked me to tell him my secrets, and I let him in, just for him to leave. I couldn't understand why. Eve had eventually come for me, checking that I was okay. I had stayed quiet, still distraught over the previous few hours. She had repeated everything 𝐲�R'𝐬 had given me, the basics of wolf's blood. Been here for the night. Been gone for a day. A lot had happened in less than 48 hours, and although I was no longer in pain, the ache that settled in my chest and gut was hard to shake. By the time the afternoon ended and evening came to take a hold, Eve had come back and tried to feed me. I had declined, saying I felt sick, and with a scowl she left it be. Before she stormed from the room, she took out my drips and told me I could leave whenever I want since the wolf blood had healed me. She had shut the door rather harshly, causing me to wince at the loud sound. I just kept upsetting people, didn't I? I rolled onto my side. The wires and needles no longer in my skin meant I could move around the bed easier. I tucked my hands beneath my chin, pulling the multitude of sheets up to my nose. Bed was comforting, bed was a haven. I think I would stay here for the night, then deal with the spiteful looks I may receive at the pack house. Would 𝐲�R'𝐬 be there? Has that where he had gone? To hide in his giant mansion away from me? Was I that disgusting? My thoughts truly were my own worst enemy, but despite even the harshest of feelings, I still drifted off to sleep. Still half asleep, a scuffling noise caught my attention, causing me to pull the blanket tighter around me. Footsteps fell lightly, so gently that they were hard to pick up. My heart jumped in my chest, my adrenaline waking my mind without my consent. Fear. It gripped my throat, cutting off the precious oxygen that I needed to breathe. Was it that time already? Was someone here to finish Blake's job? A hand gently pressed into my shoulder, and I fought hard to stay still. They patted me lightly, and I whimpered with fear. 𝐿𝐬? They whispered, and I froze. My body fell numb to the voice, my heart stuttering as the fear quickly subsided. Instead, anguish took its place, and with all of my strength and dignity, I peeked one eye open and turned my head to face the wolf in the room. Tulip, I am so sorry. My jaw clenched, fresh ears burning at the sight of 𝐲�R'𝐬 leaning over my bed. His hand encased my entire shoulder, squeezing it awfully when we made eye contact. Betrayal coated my very soul. Staring into his sorrowful eyes did nothing but make it dig deeper. Tulip. His hand moved to caress my cheek. I closed my eyes, unable to move my face away since I already pinned it to the pillows. His fingers were rough and calloused, and the faint twinge of metal hit my nose. Was he bleeding? I couldn't help but turn at his touch, curious about why I could smell blood. Blinking past the nighttime light, I saw him dressed in new clothes. His hair was damp and disheveled. His blue eyes painful as they begged me to speak. Where had he been? Why was he wet and in new clothes? Did he leave me to shower? Talk to me, please. I exhaled heavily, settling my eyes on his own why. He stopped his feather-light touch on my cheek to clutch my shoulder again, dropping his head to the floor in shame. I had to go. Why? Repeated. I couldn't stay here. Tears threatened to fall at his admission. So, it was me. Tulip. Please. Don't look at me like that. He begged, falling to his knees beside my bed. It brought him to a similar height as me, his large stature reduced to that of a young child. I could see his face more clearly, smell the fresh musky soap he must have bathed in. Upon closer inspection, I saw a few faint healed cuts on his cheeks, light pink lines in his flesh that marred his beauty. His hands were the same, fading bruises and scabs that were falling off. Where were you? His mouth parted as he struggled for words. Where were you? I emphasized each word, the saltness of my tears coating my lips. Tulip. He sighed sadly. Where were you? I snapped, a sob tumbling from my lips. He audibly whimpered, the sound so animal-like that I had to remember who I was speaking to. A beast. He could transform into a dark, furry creature, towering over me, shift his face into that of a wolf, grow claws that a witch would be envious of. Please, Tulip, just listen to me, he begged, both his hands grabbing my arm and pulling it from the sheet. I stared down at the dried blood beneath hidden on his skin as he rubbed circles into the back of my hand. I am listening, and you are not answering. He sighed, dropping his head onto the mattress. I sniffed back the tears, moving my head to stare up at the ceiling. It was dark outside. The only light was the moon shining through the curtains. It cast an eerie glow into the room, darkening the colors until everything felt gray. Gray? How bland. I will answer all your questions. Just give me a minute too. I have not been myself, he admitted. I stayed silent, swallowing thickly as he fumbled over his own thoughts. I wondered if he would lie like Darius did, make it all out to be my fault. I left because I couldn't be here. He raised his head, locking our gazes, knowing that the man who did this to you was still alive. My eyes widened. Why did you do? He growled. No, I couldn't. Who the man who destroyed your innocence? He stated, eyes blazing. I wanted to kill him, to tear him and that entire village apart, but I whispered. Rio stopped me, told me I couldn't go in alone. We needed backup. Some humans have guns and strolling through a populated village like yours could end badly. He growled. I took my anger issues out elsewhere. You don't seem happy about that. I muttered. He scoffed. I wanted to destroy every person in that town of yours for letting it happen. I should have destroyed it when I first found it, hiding from us like it would protect you. They fed you and everyone else their false information to keep you under their little spell. My eyebrows furrowed. I don't understand what you mean. The hunts are not about killing anymore. Azrael licked his lips, squeezing my hand. Some go to quench their bloodthirst, to tame the animal within. But we only take down the ones who have done wrong. We can smell it like cancer in your blood. Does that mean I had done wrong? Is that why I was attacked? Because I was impure? His hand tightened on mine, pulling me back to him. The wolves who hurt you must have smelled men on you. There is nothing wrong with you. Tulip, believe me, that man manipulated you and that whole fucking town. They never deserved someone like you. Oh fuck. Here come the tears again. 𝐲𝐲, I whispered. His hands moved to cup my face. I rolled over to face him properly, my knee still tucked into my chest. He studied me so furiously, wiping the tears that threatened to fall. They raised you like me, to hate the power-hungry, he stated. Your village taught you to fear us, that the hunt meant death. But the hunt meant life. Every spring, we would look for our soulmates. That is what the hunt became. No more innocent deaths. My chest tightened with the acceptance of his truth. I believed him. Every word that fell from his lips I knew in my gut was true. I pledge to you now, 𝐴𝐿𝐬, that I will take down that man and anyone else who hurt you and never let them see the light of day again. He promised, his face centimeters away from mine. I gulped with a strange sense of fear, knowing that he was so willing to kill, to torture people for me, for something that happened to me in the past when he didn't even know me, willing to put his life on the line to get revenge. In a sick, twisted way, I craved it. It made my chest warm, a blossom of acceptance sprouting in my heart. Did I forgive him for leaving me here after my confession of trauma? No. But everything else had me like putty in his hands. So, when a great opportunity like this one was presented to me, I had to fulfill its destiny. Pushing myself forwards, I connected our lips, my hands wrapping around the back of his neck. It took him a moment to catch on as I tried to persuade him to move with me. But when he did, a low growl erupted in his chest. He pushed me backwards, raising himself until he was hovering over me. 𝐲𝐲's hands grabbed at my face, my neck, my hair. His mouth parted my lips as his tongue dived to depths not even Darius would dare go. Nobody had ever kissed me with such passion, with such want. All other kisses in my life did not compare to the fireworks that exploded inside of me, or the burning flourish of want. I felt small and safe pressed beneath his large body, his hips settling between mine. His stomach gently brushed me as he held his weight with one arm, leaning on his forearm. His other hand moved with his motions, flexing around my throat, sucking, kissing, licking. My jaw and neck were next, small nibbles of his teeth as he tasted my skin. My heart raced in my chest, my stomach swirling with desire as my hands grabbed at his shoulders, his neck, his hair. I moaned, unable to hold it in, causing a flush of embarrassment to overcome me when he growled. His teeth grew sharper, scraping along the base of my neck as his lips sucked on my collarbone. My hands fisted his hair, pulling it sharply when one of his teeth traced the junction of skin below my ear. I felt the pulsing of my heart against his lips, his hot breath fanning my jaw. 𝐲𝐲, I breathed, arching into him. My body was on fire. I have never felt like this before, never felt such a flurry of emotions and feelings. Why was I hot? Why did the ache between my thighs grow wetter with every trace of his tongue? Are you my 𝐴𝐿𝐬? He growled, causing me to tense and arch into him. I couldn't answer, too in tune with his very heartbeat, the vibrations of his voice, his scent, tulip. My eyes fluttered open at his softer tone, finding striking night skies staring down at me. I wished where my cheeks were flushed and red as I fought to catch my breath. Even 𝐲𝐲, the 6-foot slab of muscle, was breathing harder. Everything was hard on this man. Every thing. My hands grabbed at his biceps, the muscles twitching and causing my body to clench in reaction. Will you be mine? 𝐴𝐿𝐬. Why be his? What was he asking me right now? Right now, in the middle of this. He was asking me a question. I blinked, shaking my head as I tried to sober my rampant thoughts. But his eyes, they were so blue littered with tiny little silver specks. My eyebrows furrowed. I don't. I want to make you mine. 𝐿𝐬, I want to lay my mark upon your neck so everyone everywhere will know that you are mine. Protect you. Have you? Mine, he growled. I was starstruck. My mouth ajar as I stared up at him with wonder. He wanted me. After everything that happened to me, he still wanted me. They damaged me. No one would want me. Why did 𝐲𝐲𝐬? Was this a ploy? A sick joke. Why was an alpha wolf, a powerful one at that, want me? Small, weak, human me. Was this another game of his? Stop those rampant thoughts. 𝐿𝐬 growled softly. Do you accept me as your mate? I wanted to ask him why me. Why choose me? Why have tainted goods when he could have something so much better? All it takes is a simple bite, and everyone knows you are mine. If you will have me, I immensely want you, he groaned, his hand clenching the sheets beside me. Tell me now, because I cannot hold back any longer. Tulip, I want this. All of me, I whispered. His intense, wild gaze softened. He brushed his chest against mine. His hand stroked my jaw, caressing the skin so tenderly. All of you, past, present, and future, he murmured. My lower lip wobbled, and he let out a soft laugh. Don't cry on me. Now, Tulip. He gently lowered his mouth to mine again, kissing away the tears that graced my lips. Secret treasures that would always remind me of what we spoke of, swept away into his secrecy. Emotions ran wild in my mind, my stomach heavy with want, with adoration, a strong, worthy man in my eyes. To forget about the past meant I could move forward, start fresh. Tainted goods or not, 𝐲𝐲𝐬 wanted me, all of me. So I nodded, causing the air to rush from his lungs. Are you sure? His eyes fell to my throat, his tongue licking his lips. It will hurt at first. More pain. Nothing I can't handle. If it meant a life of existing with someone, I was sure happy to withstand the initial fall. After all, you don't find flowers blossoming without some rain. I'm sure. Those were the last two words that left my lips before he claimed my mouth once more. 55. 𝐾𝐞𝐬 mature content. 𝐾𝐞𝐬 not 𝐼𝐴𝐲𝐬's hands were like 1,000 suns. Every caress, every tickle, had my body in flames. My toes curled as his mouth claimed mine, his tongue massaging and dominating my mouth. I found it exhilarating. The more he claimed me, the more urgent he became. I could feel the sharpness of his canines on my mouth as he pulled away, catching the skin and drawing a little blood. I had no time to care, to caught up grabbing his bare torso. He smelled so damn good. His head bobbed, licking down my jaw and throat, sucking and leaving me wanting more. So much more. My thighs clenched, my desire filling the room with little pants of need, of want. You ready? He murmured. I breathed obnoxiously out of my nose, a sound of distress leaving me yes. Yes, what? He teased, pulling away to look at me. I grunted, gripping the back of his hair with my fingers a little too tightly. Claim me, 𝐲𝐲𝐬, he growled, his eyes turning completely black. His mouth trailed up the left side of my jaw, one hand gripping my shoulder gently as the other held his weight. He followed the pulse of my heart, right up to the junction behind my ear. My heart raced at his proximity. A wheezy exhale left me, as the thought of those canines tearing into me suddenly crossed my mind. Just as I was about to speak his name, pain blinded me. His canines pierced my skin, breaking through muscle and tissue until the entirety of his teeth were inside. I writhed as burning erupted within me, trying to push his head away. He kept me pinned with his body, his spare hand not allowing my head to move. I cried, tears pooling in my eyes as this vicious venom pulsed down my arm, my chest, curled in my stomach and licked at my toes. It jolted me, a spasm of energy, and my head became cloudy. But then, all too quickly, the fire eased, the heat within me doused by his hand on my skin. His teeth remained deep in my skin. I couldn't feel them anymore. Intense pleasure, a blissful feeling of being featherlight. The hard contours of his body were burning me with a new flame, and I moaned as pleasure racked my body. I ground my hips up into him, causing him to growl against my throat in warning. Who did he think he was bossing me around? Am I Haze? My hand slid from beneath him, grabbing at his chest as soft moans left on every breath until my heart calmed down. He hesitated next, his growl dying in his throat, before he slowly pulled his teeth from my flesh. I felt the blood gush immediately from the depth of his canines, but with a low moan, his tongue moved to lick it away. He tended to my throat whilst I lay bathed in a dizzy spell, unsure if I was awake or asleep. All I could feel was him, a pulsing in my veins, the protective weight of his body. When his head reared, I opened my gaze to find him admiring his handiwork. His eyes were back to blue, although wild with excitement. His cheeks flushed, hair disheveled, and his chin coated with my blood. I didn't find it repulsive when his hand moved to wipe it away and then lick it clean. It made me weirdly attracted to him. His lips moved, but I was too busy intensely staring at them to realize he was speaking. 𝐿𝐬? I snapped out of it at the sudden intrusive voice, fear coating me as I realized his lips didn't move that time. It was as though someone had connected a microphone to his mouth and my head was the speakers. His voice was that clear. What? Just. He chuckled, caressing my chin to tilt my eyes up to meet his. �𝐴 means I can appear inside your head. He seemed awfully pleased at my lack of privacy, if his grin was anything to go by. That was not in the fine print. I huffed. He laughed again, moving to rest his weight on his elbows. Despite being ravenous, horny beings a mere moment ago, I relaxed into his hold. My body seemed to respond to his, my mind humming with comfort as his hands ran through my hair. He was watching me curiously, but his eyes were fogged slightly. I felt a strange tension in the front of my head and put it off as a side effect for now. What happens now? I whispered. He blinked, his eyes clearing just as the headache disappeared. I paused, narrowing my eyes at him. That weird feeling in my head. I began, and he smirked. That was you in my head. Yes, get out of my head. I snapped, huffing. Can't help myself. Tulip. He grinned, kissing my nose. I'm like a kid who has never been to a sweet shop before. I can't help but look at everything. I rolled my eyes. Everything? As much as I can? He explained as a slight frown marred his beauty. You've blocked some off. I can't get to it without your permission. You don't seem pleased about that, I teased. He rolled his eyes, smirking once more. I just want to know you. As the time goes on, I will have explored all of your memories. I paused, holding my breath so much I felt lightheaded. All Othra knows my knees choosing me. Those I fear are what you locked away. Trauma leads us to force it out of our minds. Nodding, I shakily exhaled. Okay. I'm not ready to revisit those with you yet. His hand curled around a particular hair, running it over his palm. You have already told me enough to understand you. I promise you, Tulip, I will look after you. A heavy weight that felt an awful lot like adoration settled on my chest. Opening my mouth to respond, the door opening rudely interrupted me. 𝐻𝐬 growled, pressing his weight onto me. I shrieked, sinking into the covers as I practically disappeared under his weight. Damn it, he was heavy. Was he holding all of this back earlier? Alpha, I apologize, but it is urgent. Eve gushed. Ezra snapped his teeth. What? Blake is awake? He is. Animal. He claims he wants to speak to you rather urgently. Eve stammered, causing my heart to race. Tell him to wait. 𝐻𝐬 snarled. He is nearly breaking free. Alpha, I'm sorry. I am just the messenger. Eve shrieked. 𝐻𝐬's growl deepened. His bare chest was the only thing I could see from my position beneath him. I was worrying blindly, my heart picking up pace as adrenaline fueled my veins. Did Blake want me again? Was he going to find me? A small cry of surprise escaped my lips when 𝐻𝐬 suddenly lifted himself from me. Blue eyes peered down at me like a bird in a nest, and he cocked his head. I felt that strange tension in my head as he begged to read me. Blake's words and actions were plaguing me, and he wanted to see. I don't know what I was doing. So new to the whole thing. But I accepted his want, and it was almost like a switch when 𝐻𝐬 dived deeper into my mind. I felt nothing but tension as he invaded my mind, his eyes darkening and body shaking as he flickered through whatever he found. Counting was my only vice to calm down, even with how magically bizarre this was. 𝐻𝐬 was so close to me, I feared his beast would rip in half if he shifted. After a mere 8 seconds, he pulled away. Pure rage coated his features as he went to move off me. I shakily raised my hand to settle above his heart, feeling it pound against my palm. He paused. The gentle rumbling of his chest shook my hand. I gulped, lifting my eyes from his tattooed chest to meet his eyes. He had not shifted into his beast yet. The image of the half-shift mere hours ago was still something I thought about. 𝐻𝐬 had recoiled from me like I had burned him, and I felt the tension leave my head. I apologized softly, dropping my eyes. He must have not liked whatever I just thought. Don't, he growled through sharpened teeth. I scare you. I am sorry. His speech was broken, a sign I took as his beast taking over his mind. I went to tell him otherwise, but he was on his feet and staring down at me within a second. I must go. I will be right back. The fear of abandonment struck me just as he turned to walk away, and he paused mid-step. With quick movements, he was back over me, kissing my lips softly to not catch me with his teeth. Delicately, he pulled away, running his hand down my cheek as his black eyes gazed down at me. I promise. I swallowed harshly, nodding once in response. He would be back. He promised. 𝐻𝐬 straightened up, shooting a glare at Eve, who kept her head bowed by the doors. You stay? Yes, Alpha. She bared her neck to the side. He was gone then. The gently breeze of his speed a reminder that he was only here a moment ago. I heard doors slam. Worried shrieks came from doctors as he barreled his way out of the hospital. I listened until I couldn't hear anymore. And that was when I looked to Eve. She was watching me knowingly, her face unusually blank of emotion. Eve was generally easy to read, so the slight hint of a frown with an otherwise blank face threw me. I cleared my throat, and she blinked, looking directly into my eyes. He marked you. I gritted my teeth, feeling the drying skin tug. Yeah? She nodded, moving closer to me. She leaned over slightly, her scrubs a dark blue today that reminded me of 𝐻𝐬. Damn it. I'm turning into a needy teenage girl. It's healing already. The blood he gave you last night has boosted the claim. I glanced at the still dark sky beyond the curtains before looking back at her. Boosted. She shrugged. Humans are slow healers, so his blood definitely helps heal it. It's probably going to cause some overwhelming emotions and hormones. Though, so be prepared why. I frowned. Well, usually after one claim comes the other. And it sends the bond into a big fluttering of hormones. My eyebrows remained furrowed, and she nasally laughed. Nature will want you to complete the bond. You're going to go on a roller coaster of emotions if you don't. Complete the bond. Have sex with him. My eyes widened. Mayhem. Yes, was I even ready for that? I mean, asked me 10 minutes ago. Sure. But now I was sober. And thinking clearly and, oh man. How long? Until it drives you insane? She laughed when I nodded. About a month. A full moon cycle usually. Well, then, I scrambled for thought. I will just look forward to my period. When's that? She wondered. About a week. Or so. She sucked through her teeth, causing me to frown. It'll still drive you insane. I do not recommend your first mating to be on your period, though. Despite the not so pleasant topic. I asked why. Well, how do I put this? She muttered. Just out with it. I stated. Of course. She grinned. The first mating usually goes a couple of rounds. It does. I interrupted. Yes, she blushed. One is in control. The sweet mating. And then, there's the beast. I quirked an eyebrow at her absurdness. This sounds like some kind of fictional story. It's not. She tucked D at me. His beast. His instincts will be driven to take you. Like to take you. He will have the urge to claim what's his. Spill his seed. Make you his. Most first matings happen twice. But I have heard of some males going for more. Being on your period. Sounds gross. My eyes bugged, shaking my head rapidly. No. Everything you just said. Too soon. Why did no one tell me this before I let him sink his damn teeth in? This is not normal. She grinned apologetically. Sorry. My head fell into my pillow as I groaned. I have never taken a man like that so intimately. I always gave and never received. The one time I did, it ended badly. Admittedly, I was afraid. Afraid of the act, of 𝐲𝐸 and of what I was going to feel leading up to it. Darius had always been careful not to knock me up, but I feared if he was right. It may be a risky future. I can't have a child. I breathed. It is your duty, she mumbled. My head snapped to her, sudden anger coating my soul as my hands clenched. My duty. Was this my mother I was speaking to? She cringed, dropping her eyes. You are to be Luna now. You have responsibilities, many of them, and one is bearing his heir. His heir. I cocked my head, narrowing my eyes. My body. My potential child. Not just his. If I don't want children, then I don't want them. You or no one else gets a say in that. She bowed her head, apologizing. Of course. 𝐿𝐸. I huffed, crossing my arms and looking away from her. I nearly bitch slapped her the heck out of her. She kept her head bowed as my anger dissipated and eventually I sighed, relaxing my body. I have gone through so much shit in my life. I cannot bring a child into a world that has an uncertain future. Why would it be uncertain? She wondered, looking back up at me. You have 𝐲𝐸 an entire pack. Still trying to sell me on the baby thing. Wasn't she? I could appreciate Eve's dedication to her nature. Her animalistic thinking was something that I knew was ingrained into her very soul. She was all rules and regulation, all history and facts. I would not change her opinion on this, and I knew that. What has happened to me a mere day ago has proved that people want to hurt me. Does it? She asked, confused. I hesitated at her suddenly confused expression. Not used to seeing her without facts. Blake was going to sell me to someone. I stated. She licked her lips. A strange, incomprehensible expression masking her features. I wasn't very good at reading that one. Not sure what it was entailing. Her lips frowned and her eyes were doing things I wasn't sure of. I would have to ask him why later. He was... Did you tell Asra? I shook my head, blushing. Didn't really get the chance. A lot has happened. Yes, she hummed, frowning. You better get some sleep. It's nearly 1:30 in the morning. You should sleep that mark off it'll heal over by morning. Then you should go home. Okay. I nodded, settling further into the absurd amount of hospital sheets. Sounds good to me. She smiled firmly, not showing it in her eyes as she bid me good night and scurried from the room. I knew she was going to tattle on me to Asra about withholding information. Eve really was a weird one.